Hello and welcome to episode 229 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. Next week marks the 30th anniversary of the release of Disney's Pocahontas. That just so happens to be my good friend Gillian's favorite Disney princess movie of all time. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking about Pocahontas on the podcast. I'll start things off talking about the history surrounding the project, but then Gillian will join us to share why she loves it so much. Before we get started, I have to ask you to take 30 seconds to subscribe to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. We routinely get more people catching the podcast on YouTube than are subscribed to the channel. It would help us out so much if all of you just clicked that button. In addition to brand new episodes of the podcast every Thursday, I also have tons of Disney and Universal video content. Since I've moved back up to the Northeast, I've also started sharing travel content from up this way. It's actually fitting that we're talking about a movie like Pocahontas today. With the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence coming up next year, I'm going to take advantage of my location to bring you a lot of spots that have played an important part in U.S. history. To make sure you're part of everything we're doing here, you just have to be subscribed. While you're there, like videos and podcasts, comment with positive messages, and don't forget to share content with your friends and on social media. Of course, it's also Pride Month. While we have nothing to do with this fundraiser, I always like to use my platform to promote Alicia Stella and Orlando Park Stop in their month-long fundraiser for the Trevor Project. We're living through incredibly hard times. Marginalized communities are literally under attack, and the trans community in particular is a focus of the worst types of people right now. The Trevor Project does incredible work to help LGBTQ+ youth. To donate, head to give.thetrevorproject.org/parkstop. That's give.thetrevorproject.org/parkstop. If you're looking for art prints, go to parkstop.myshopify.com/collections/art. That's parkstop.myshopify.com/collections/art. Anything you could give would make a difference. Now let's move on to today's main topic. Last year for the 4th of July, I did an episode of the podcast where I did a re-theme of the American Adventure Show in the U.S. Pavilion at Epcot. One of my issues with that show was that it started with the Pilgrims on their way to Plymouth, Massachusetts. Yes, many of our U.S. history textbooks started with the Pilgrims, but I think that Jamestown, Virginia, was way more emblematic of the early English settlements in the New World. While the Pilgrims were seeking religious freedom and life of living off the land, Jamestown was founded to make money. According to the History Channel documentary America, the Story of Us, the first settlers at Jamestown had chemical tests for gold, but no livestock. It wasn't just a money-making venture, it was a get-rich-quick scheme. This was a much bigger part of early English migration to the colonies than religion, although that certainly did play a part in some regions more than others. This desire for gold was adequately represented in the animated movie, even if most of the rest of the history was sketchy to outright fiction. John Smith was sent to this incarnation of Jamestown that couldn't even feed itself. At the time, the food supplies for the colonists were only enough for 1 or 2 cups of grain meal per day per person. After the first winter, Smith wrote that, quote, "More than half of us died." Smith got strict with his fellow Virginians and made sure that they put in the work to grow produce and other food. He also was instrumental in mapping the Chesapeake Bay and its waterways. After Pocahontas, who was around 11 to 12 years old at the time, warned Smith of efforts among the natives and the Virginians to have him killed, the explorer decided to get tough about his survival. At a meeting with his men, Smith assured them that, quote, "He that will not work shall not eat." That was after what was probably his most interesting interaction with the Powhatan tribe in December of 1607. While looking for food along the Chickahominy River, he was taken captive and brought to a meeting with Chief Powhatan. He was removed to a hunting camp, where he was treated like an honored guest with feasts and other impressive amenities for the time. According to Smith's accounts, when having trouble contacting the chief, it was determined that his attentions were friendly. It's important to note that this account from Smith is highly suspect. First of all, he never spoke of many aspects of the story until after John Rolfe had married Pocahontas and brought her to England. It's very possible that even the history that Disney tried to loosely recreate in the movie was already embellished. It was during the First Anglo-Powhatan War that Pocahontas was captured. The Jamestown settlers were now coming to violent clashes with the natives. The colonists felt that Pocahontas could be used as ransom to her father, Chief Powhatan, to get Virginian prisoners released. While Powhatan did return prisoners, he refused to give back various stolen weapons and tools. During these negotiations, Pocahontas was held by the English in what is now Chesterfield County, Virginia. Many speculate that Pocahontas was the victim of sexual assault while in captivity. However, other historians speculate the English would not have abused her in that way because it would have hurt negotiations with the Powhatan. Helen Roundtree points out that, quote, "A truce had been called. The Indians still far outnumbered the English, and the colonists feared retaliation." While under captivity, Minister Alexander Whitaker worked with Pocahontas to improve her knowledge of the English language, and he of course used the opportunity to teach her Christianity. Pocahontas was then baptized and she took the Christian name Rebecca. By March of 1614, during a period of violence between the colonists and Powhatan men, Pocahontas was given the opportunity by the Virginians to talk with her tribe. When her father arrived, she said that he valued her, quote, "less than old swords, pieces, or axes." She decided that she would stay with the English settlers. John Rolfe was a religious man who found a lot of financial success by starting the plantation Varina Farms, which produced a special strain of tobacco. His English-born wife Sarah and child Bermuda died after a shipwreck on the Summer Isles, which are now known as Bermuda. Rolfe met Pocahontas during her time with Minister Alexander Whitaker. Even though she had converted to Christianity, Ralph still wasn't sure about the morality of marrying somebody with a native background. Rolfe actually wrote a long letter to the governor looking for permission to marry Pocahontas. He wrote, quote, "motivated not by the unbridled desire of carnal affection, but for the good of this plantation, for the honor of our country, for the glory of God, for my own salvation, namely Pocahontas, to win my heart, and best thoughts are, and have been a long time so entangled and enthralled in so intricate a labyrinth, that I was even wearied to unwind myself thereout." The wedding of Rolfe and Pocahontas led to an 8-year stretch of peace between the colonists and Powhatan's tribes, known as the Peace of Pocahontas. The couple were married on April 5th of 1614, and the pair's son Thomas was born the following January. Surprisingly, the biggest controversy surrounding the marriage came from British courts, who viewed Pocahontas as the daughter of the chief, being a princess and marrying a commoner. The family of 3 lived at Varina Farms until 1616, when they were lured to go back to England. The London Company had a very prominent goal of converting Native Americans to Christianity. Pocahontas's conversion and her marriage to Rolfe served as an example of settlers, quote-unquote, civilizing the indigenous population. On June 12th, the family arrived at the port of Plymouth before heading to London. They weren't alone, however. There were 11 other Powhatans with them. John Smith was living in London during this trip. He never met with Pocahontas on the trip, but he did write to Queen Anne about Pocahontas. Smith wanted to make sure she was treated with respect. A lot of his motives weren't because of his affection for Pocahontas, but he believed that insulting the young woman might lead to her turning away from Christianity, and it could be difficult to continue the peace in Jamestown if that happened. In England, Pocahontas wasn't treated like royalty, but more like a curiosity. She did eventually meet with John Smith and told him that back in Virginia, the Powhatans were under the impression that he had died. On a ship back to Virginia in March 1617, Pocahontas got sick and she was taken ashore. She declared that, quote, all must die. She passed at the approximate age of 21, and her son Thomas Rolfe survived. This is why we have the fairly meaningless piece of trivia that Pocahontas is the 12th great-grandmother of the actor Edward Norton. There's a lot of speculation to Pocahontas' cause of death, from pneumonia, tuberculosis, smallpox, hemorrhagic dysentery, which was known as the Bloody Flux, and poisoning. She was buried in the parish of St. George's Church, Gravesend. This church was destroyed in a fire in 1727, so the exact site of her grave is unknown. There is now a statue dedicated to Pocahontas outside St. George's Church to commemorate that her remains still exist on the grounds of the property. As for the history of the movie, it came at the peak of the Disney Renaissance and in the middle of the tenure of Disney chairman and CEO Michael Eisner. We have been talking about Eisner and his time in charge of the company for months now. He was never afraid of chasing the big idea, and he had a gigantic idea for the premiere of Pocahontas. On June 10th of 1995, they held the premiere of the movie in Central Park in New York City. Back in April, a newspaper sweepstakes invited people to, quote, be a part of motion picture history. 500,000 people entered, with only 20% of them winning tickets to the Pocahontas Premiere in the Park Spectacular. The 100,000 guests were permitted to start finding their places in Central Park at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the gates opened for the day. There was family-friendly entertainment for the entire wait. This included performances from the Disneyland Band, Future Corps brass players from Epcot, Lebo M and a choir performing Circle of Life from The Lion King, and Paige O'Hara and Jodie Benson, the voices of Princess Belle and Ariel, respectively. The movie started at 9:30 p.m. Despite the long-threatened rain actually starting to fall during the movie, very few guests were seen leaving. While the controversies surrounding some of the more questionable decisions made by Disney on this movie have caused the company to talk about Pocahontas a lot less than the other Renaissance-era princess movies, it is a misconception that the movie bombed when it was released. It won 2 Academy Awards, both for music. Alan Menken grabbed the Oscar for Best Original Music or Comedy Score and for Best Original Song with Colors of the Wind. Vanessa Williams' version of Colors of the Wind was a huge hit on the radio, hitting number 4 on the US Hot 100 and number 2 on the Adult Contemporary charts. It was the number 31 song of the year, according to the Hot 100. It was certified gold with over 700,000 copies sold. The song was inspired by a quote from Chief Seattle, quote, "The wind that gave our grandfather his first breath also received his last sigh. The wind also gives our children the spirit of life. So if we sell our land, you must keep it apart and sacred, as a place where man can go to taste the wind that is sweetened by the meadow flowers. The movie had a budget of $55 million and had a box office take of over $346 million. The fact that the movie is not seen in the parks as much as some of its contemporaries is 100% a retrospective sense of concern about the film, because it did not underperform in any form or fashion. My good friend Gillian is going to be here for the next 2 weeks to talk about the film. Let's get things started right now. Thanks for being here, G.
No problem. Hi.
So I want to just get right to the races on this movie, because this is your favorite Disney princess movie, and we're going to really want to cover a lot of different aspects of that. So first of all, why don't you just say, what is it about this movie that makes it your favorite Disney princess movie?
It's just probably gonna sound corny, but it's the love story. I mean, close second, probably just the art and the aesthetic of the entire movie, the animation, close second. But the love story, I'm gonna just get right to it. I was a hormonal teenage girl watching this movie for the first time, and the story of them falling in love, and then this doesn't end like a normal Disney movie. Like, I don't know, should we like spoiler alert on this, or like, do you think it's okay to just come out and say the ending?
I think after 30 years, if somebody wanted to watch it, they probably would have watched it by now.
Hey, you hadn't seen it until just recently, but yeah. This doesn't end like a typical Disney movie because, of course, in keeping with the very, very, very vague history, they don't end up together at the end. You know, she doesn't find her prince, she finds herself, and she has to go on alone. And that killed me. That killed me as a teenage girl. I can still remember it like it was yesterday, sobbing to my very core of my 16-year-old being in my living room watching this movie on VHS for the first time. And it's the love story that hooked me.
So that's obviously something that is very different about this Disney princess movie than at least the other ones of the Disney Renaissance. Another difference is that Disney really does not, and maybe they've been doing a little bit better job in recent years, but Pocahontas is a Disney princess that they have almost hidden.
Well, that I would say is mostly because of the backlash that they received from the Native American community when this movie came out. It was widely panned. They did not like this movie at all, and rightly so. I mean, it's just the history is just, they didn't, and I don't know who was in charge of that. I should know because I've researched this movie a billion times, but their take on the history was just, I am a firm believer that they should have just slapped any other name on the characters on this movie, called it a day. It would have been a beautiful story that stood the test of time had they not chosen actual historical people who lived in real life for this movie.
Right, like you look at some of the other movies that have been loose adaptations. I guess the closest thing to this would be Hercules, just because that's actual mythology that is a part of history. Like, we know the actual Hercules mythology throughout history, but this isn't like, taking the Ice Queen and loosely adapting it to Frozen.
Yeah.
This is taking an actual person with, well, actually multiple actual people. Like, John Smith actually existed.
Mm-hmm. Her father, they even say that Kocoum is loosely based on somebody in the tribe.
So I definitely think, and I agree with you, that if they would have changed the name, if they wouldn't have tried to connect it to that exact person, those exact people, maybe even instead of having it be Jamestown, having it be a later colony, a couple decades later, when some of this stuff wasn't quite as stark, even. Like, at this point, it is such a problematic time to try to make that connection. But yeah, so that has led to Pocahontas being very underrepresented in the parks. The meet and greet for Pocahontas happens at Animal Kingdom, which is another one of those problems that Disney has with associating characters of color with Animal Kingdom
Yeah.
for some reason.
Yep.
It makes
I
a
think
little more sense with Pocahontas because of just the story and how she is involved in conservation and nature. And John Smith talks about wanting to build big cities in the New World, while she's saying, well, that's not necessarily the right way to go. So I get why they think that makes sense, but it's still something that they do way, way too often.
Yeah, I think they very much play it off of the the earth and the nature and the environment aspect of the park is what they try to do, but it always ends up being, like you said, people of color or their characters that aren't white. But yeah, I agree. That's exactly what they did. And I mean, since we're talking, it's the 30th anniversary. I mean, it is true because I was, present when this movie came out on VHS. I didn't see it in the theater, but I saw it as soon as it was released on VHS. And the minute I did, I wanted every bit of merchandise I could. But, the VHS didn't come out until 2 years after the movie released back then. It's not like it is today, of course, like many other things. But I wanted every bit of merch I could find. Nothing. It was already in outlet malls. It was already cast out of the Disney stores in the mall. It was gone. Like, my parents on our Disney vacations were tracking down cast members and asking managers, where is your Pocahontas merchandise? And from then on, we didn't see any resurgence in merchandise, like her in the parks, any them being included in clips for Disney, for various Disney things, until about 10 years ago, until like the 20th anniversary. And that's when you started seeing all the merch trickle back in, and me being broke again, buying it all.
You certainly did go out and buy it all. And I never really put two and two together that back then, by the time you would see a movie, if you didn't see it in the theaters, that all of the marketing would have been done and all of the merchandise would have been gone from the parks. It's not like it is today. And that is something that, in the case of Pocahontas, where it didn't do the numbers that they were expecting, I just never connected that that's why every time Miko appears on something, you were texting me like, hey, are you going to be in the parks? Can you get me this pin or this
Oh my
pair of
God.
ears?
Yeah, that's exactly why. Because I spent 20 years chasing this stuff down on eBay, or like if one single solitary thing happened to pop up 1 year in that 20-year span, I'd have to like lose my mind and find it and like pay, whatever resellers wanted for it. But yes, that is exactly why I became like a treasure hunter in that sense.
So I want to move on to some of the positives from the movie and some of the things that I think have stood the test of time. And one of them is that this movie has some bangers on the soundtrack.
Yes, 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 yes.
And I would say that it had two legitimate hits on it. Definitely Colors of the Wind
Mm-hmm.
was a big hit, but I would even say that Just Around the River Bend was sort of a moderate hit as well, where this put two big songs. And Beauty and the Beast had a lot of big songs, and Little Mermaid had a lot of big songs. But even through the Disney Renaissance, like there was one song in Mulan that was
Mm-hmm.
big. I guess I'll make a man, but that's a different kind of big. That's Disney big, not
Yeah.
general public big. And it did have two major songs, and then the soundtrack itself is really, really good. Do you think that the music played a part in how much you related to this movie?
Um, yes, I mean, of course. I mean, but I feel that musical connection with any Disney movie. But Colors of the Wind definitely probably did it, was at the top. It won an Oscar that year. That was I think the only Oscar that Pocahontas won. For I can't remember everything they were nominated for, but Colors of the Wind got an Oscar for the song. And fun fact, I was going to ask you, did you just watch the movie on Disney Plus, or did you like watch it in some other form with extras or anything, content of any kind?
No, and I guess we'll get to this. I had never seen Pocahontas
Yes.
until preparing for this episode. So I have only watched it once, and I watched it very recently. I did watch the Disney Plus version.
Okay.
So didn't see any extras. I
Okay.
know a lot of the stories surrounding the movie from other things I've seen, but there's a lot that probably I am missing.
Oh, do you remember? Did you stay through for the credits? Did for the song that hit as soon as the credits started rolling? It was a song called "If I Never Knew You" by John Cicada and Shanice.
Yes.
So that, fun fact, was a whole deleted scene from the movie. They had it almost animated all the way out. It was supposed to be a love ballad for the movie, and Mel Gibson and Judy Kuhn sang it. And on the 10th anniversary release, I believe, of the DVD, they had released that extra footage and set it to a very rough draft animated version of it. That is probably, honestly, my favorite song, because it's just a beautiful song. And seeing the characters actually sing it to each other, it happens after John Smith is captured and is being held. It's what they're saying to each other before they say goodbye, because he's going to die in the morning. That is probably my favorite song that I never got to experience until 10 years after I seen the movie for the first time. But that, again, that's my nerd trivia.
And I know that in retrospect, this is another thing that aged very poorly about the movie. But at the time, Mel Gibson was a get.
Yes. Yes. Big deal. And unfortunately, one of my biggest girlhood crushes. And this movie probably solidified that, and is why I became such a huge fan of his afterward. But yeah, honestly, this was it. It was this movie. When I found out he was John Smith, and he was a good looking guy, and John Smith was a good looking guy. Once again, I told you I was a hormonal teenager. I just he became one of my biggest crushes, Hollywood crushes. And yes, that has not aged well at all.
But it should have been something that at the time you would have thought would have helped this movie. Now, I know that a lot of the other famous people that got tapped for Disney Renaissance movies, you're talking about having Robin Williams as the genie. You're talking about Eddie Murphy as Mushu. I think they tried to get comedians to play the second tier characters, and Mel Gibson is a lot of things. A comedian, he is not. So I think
He is though. He is though. You to watch the Lethal Weapons and those movies. He's hilarious. He's a sorry. He's a smart aleck, and he's very good. He's very good at comedy. I imagine you probably haven't seen very much of it, but that's another conversation for another time.
He's good at comedy, but he's not required to do that in this role. Like, it was a different celebrity get than
Yeah.
the previous
Yes.
Renaissance movies. So they kind of went away from the formula a little bit. I mean, they really did go away from the formula because in this one, the sidekicks don't talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's animals. And that is something that is very, very different from a lot of the other Disney, especially Renaissance movies.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to leave things off this week, but Gillian will be back on the show next Thursday to continue our conversation about the movie. With the 4th of July on the horizon, I'm also going to talk about a couple recent trips I've made that revolve around major moments in United States history. It can be hard to feel patriotic at this point in time, and I have never been a flag waver who can't acknowledge the many flaws of our nation's past. Still, there are moments when the U.S. has fought for what is right, and there were certainly times when we made claims about human rights that inspired millions, even if the country eventually fell short of those declarations. Being reminded of those times can make it feel like there could be positives in the future, and that good people have laid down their lives to fight against the very types of people trying to oppress people and suppress rights. We have won these wars in the past. Do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe at the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. Everything helps us. We will be back next week with another new episode. Until then, have a great week.